Was it? I hope no one's listening to this very loud, sitting in traffic. It's gonna be wild. Welcome back, guys. It's episode 22 of Adjusting the Game. Behind the scenes, the Reebok Rebel Renegade Games. Tris, what's up, bro?
Was that was basically the theme of the weekend. For whatever reason, that's just the way we were greeting people at this point. I don't know if we lost some marbles there, but that's that was the status quo for the weekend.
It was the sign of the fatigue, mate. We started pulling in some bangers from back in the past. We instantly got transported back to the 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. My watch said I averaged about 4.5 hours of sleep over that week. I'm happy to be back in Cape Town, but Joburg was very, very, very enjoyable, surprisingly so. Sandton is still standing. Happy to report that. Sandton Convention Center was epic. I'm not sure, was it the same venue last year, or it was incredible this year? Genuinely incredible.
No, it wasn't the same venue this year. Different venue. Not that last year's venue wasn't great; it was impeccable. But that's something that the team just keep doing. It just gets bigger and better every single year. So they moved up shop a little closer towards Sanson this side this year, which is really cool. And yes, they did a phenomenal job. I mean, again, not to say that last year wasn't great, but even just it's not just me that thinks so. I mean, speaking to the athletes that have competed there multiple years in a row, everyone is just like, this year was just a massive step up, and you could see it. It just gave those same type of vibes that you get from like those big international stage comps. It was a phenomenally put together event. So guys, I mean, today's episode is going to be a little bit different, and I'm genuinely excited for it because it's not something we generally speak about. But to be fair, we've never done something like that before. So we're going to be taking a bit of a step out of the whole like treatment room scenario and taking you behind the scenes of what was probably one of the most incredible sporting events I've certainly ever worked, and I think Tristan would probably say the same. Recently had the privilege of serving as head of the medical side of things at the CrossFit Reebok Rebel Renegade Games semi-finals event, which qualifies athletes to go to the CrossFit Game. And if you're a CrossFit fan or functional fitness fan, was pretty much sports in general, you've probably seen all the highlights. You've seen all the athletes lifting ridiculous weights. Shout out Caden Stain. Athletes flying through the weights, pushing themselves to absolute limits, and competing for the opportunity to go to the CrossFit Games. What you don't see are the hours before those moments. You don't see the conversations, the preparation, the pressure. You don't see the treatment tables, what that recovery area sometimes looks like, and like the decision making that goes into it, the emotional highs, the emotional lows. The hundreds of moving parts that are essentially required to pull something this big off. And that's exactly what we necessarily want to talk about today. Because while the competition floor gets all the attention, and it very much well should be, I feel like we certainly had the privilege of getting an entire picture and seeing exactly how much goes on behind the curtains.
Yeah, and the incredible thing about this was it was quite a few local CrossFit boxes and teams, also quite a few internationals. We had, I think, 1 or 2 or 3 maybe Americans, 2 or 3 Norwegians, and then obviously the rest of was it Africa, Asia, Middle East. So that was very, very cool seeing how the fittest in those regions kind of all came together, and very much the treatment zone at some point, maybe not Thursday or Friday, but Saturday and Sunday definitely looked more like a war zone as the events kind of got stacked together, and okay, there's a big grip workout, or there's a big lower back workout coming, and you kind of think you're going to see, you have an idea of what you're going to expect, and then you see a few of that, and then there's the most random things also coming through, and you're like, you did what? And you injured yourself how? So that, that was, I think for me, that made it very exciting. You kind of, in your head, had an idea of what was coming after each event, looking at the event. And then we were also kind of watching the events because we were right next to the competition floor in a not a VIP area, but only a athletes and coaches area. So that was literally the only people. And then the treatment team that we had with I think was 10 interns, Gara interns in the end, or around 10. So it was a TV, one singular TV. Might next year get 2 TVs. Very excited about that. Inside nudge. But we were able to kind of look at some of the, follow the athletes that we were treating and seeing them on the floor without really having to leave the area and neglect our duties because we were always on duty. And it was interesting how Thursday, Friday was the quiet before the storm. And after that, it kind of took a bit more serious. So we were always staying in the athlete area, and it was very cool to see them on the floor, and kind of one athlete's worried about a bicep and the next one's worried about a shoulder and a knee and whatever. And we strap them up and you kind of see, okay, they did well, or they kind of hung in there, or they struggled a little bit with this or that. It just gives you a kind of a better idea how they're moving and then what we could potentially do differently. So that was special. I think a lot of the other sporting events, if you think about like the Absa Cape Epic, you kind of can follow them a little bit online, but it's less intimate. You can't really see them. You're only seeing them at the end of the day. They've showered, they've had food, they've kind of had time to decompress a little bit, where this was very much straight off the floor into the treatment area or the recovery zone, where they're coming directly to us or immediately after the event or just chilling there. You can kind of see the mood. You can kind of see, oh man, her back's not doing well. Oh, she's not carrying that rucksack on this shoulder. It's on the opposite shoulder. And I think that was something very, very special. And I mean, CrossFit is tough on a good day, but then stringing these events over 4 days and then obviously competing at that level was incredible to see.
Yeah, I think I think definitely for you and I, this is the first time, not only when working within the CrossFit sphere, which I mean, we have experience in, it's, I think, the first time we've ever experienced being in the position that we were in, particularly as well, which I think was a bit of a different flavor to it. So for Tristan and I, the role extended far beyond simply just responding to injuries. It involved essentially overseeing both the competition floor and the behind the scenes medical and recovery operations to basically ensure that athletes receive the highest standard of care throughout the event. On the competition floor, the one aspect, the priority is obviously managing any acute injuries that come in, or medical emergencies that arise, ensuring athletes are basically assessed properly, treated appropriately, and then the immediate safety, remains the obviously primary concern. This requires obviously close coordination with all the other staff that we worked with that are part of the medical team and the emergency personnel that we work with. And then we had the other aspect, which is very much behind the scenes, where we spent most of our time, which then the focus shifts towards supervising the medical and recovery team that we had working with us, which were those Cairo interns, supporting the athletes between events and helping them prepare for the demands of the weekend. And it was a 4-day competition. So, I mean, it's like Tristan said, those early days, it's okay. And then it's like this massive flood of just bodies that will just start to kind of get, as the cumulative fatigue and the events start to kind of take their toll. And when that comes in, it includes managing recovery strategies, assessing and treating injuries, monitoring ongoing concerns that athletes might have come in with or that popped up during the weekend, and then obviously providing guidance what athletes can realistically expect from their bodies as the competition progresses. In many ways, the role is essentially then divided into those two distinct areas, the front and the back of house. The visible side on the competition floor, where the immediate medical care is delivered when required, and then the less visible side in the recovery zone, where much of the work that we do revolves around obviously keeping athletes healthy, prepared, performing at their best throughout the course of the entire event. And I mean, it's wild to see some of the things that obviously transpire in the back that we haven't necessarily been exposed to at that level, especially with an event of this nature. What the crowd sees them cross the finish line. Medical sees everything that happens afterwards. And sometimes that's where the real battle begins. Athletes walk off the floor completely exhausted, as Tristan was mentioning, heart rates through the roof, muscles are cramping, energy is depleted, weak arms, knees are heavy, mom spaghetti, all that stuff. Like, emotions are running high. And for some athletes, they had just produced the performance of their lives. For others, unfortunately, they had just made a costly mistake. Some qualification dreams became a reality. Others, their dreams, unfortunately, might have slipped away. And yet, regardless of what happened, most of them, because it's a multi-event, multiple days, and with many events kind of spreading over those days, they had events that they needed to kind of get themselves ready for again. So there's no time to dwell on either mistakes or even victories won. It's No time to feel sorry for yourself. Athletes who are walking in sometimes clean off the floor straight with an injury or just buggered from the workout. And the recovery area became a really interesting place, like just to mention, like a bit of a war zone. Part strategy room sometimes, part counseling office, sometimes just a freaking survival station. You know, everyone looking for solutions. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's mental. Often it was both. And that was actually quite an interesting one that I didn't necessarily expect, which you can touch on a little bit later, was obviously the mental side of things that you're dealing with athletes. I think it's not something that's necessarily discussed and was kind of an eye opener for me is the mental game that necessarily you need to focus on as opposed to just obviously the physical. And you quickly realize that athletes care is simply, you know, not about just the muscles and joints and that sort of stuff. It's about helping people perform at their best under the immense pressure that they come in. And that can encompass physical treatment, reassurance. Sometimes it means just simply listening and giving you advice and making sure that they can get through the weekend in one piece.
Yeah, I mean, I felt a lot of the time we are a little bit in the role of just being a soundboard. We would kind of just kind of unpack what just happened, their frustrations, especially in the team events, because it's not all you. There's three other people also in your team, So you kind of look nervously to the left and right, and maybe drop the other one teammate under the bus a little bit and say, yeah, he or she didn't do that well, or we're under pressure now, or we want to beat up. And it's interesting how there was 40 teams and then 40 individual men and then 40 individual women, more or less, give or take. And it was nice to we were treating the top teams and the top individuals, and everyone had goals for the weekend. Everyone had like an idea of how their weekend should be going. Obviously the top dogs wanted to qualify or beat one or the other team or stay ahead of this team. Where some of the guys, we just want to try and stay top 10. And then on the other side of the spectrum were when the guys that came in a little bit overcooked. Some of them came, shame. Some of the Western Cape boxers, the first 2 days were rough. The lungs were struggling. So
Half rough, Pete. Half felt is
yes,
rough.
yeah. So things like that you don't really take into consideration. And again, if you take the different kind of spectrum of the teams, the guys that are realistically trying to get a top 20 or a top 30 result, and they kind of know there's no real chance of them getting to the games, and these guys have actual jobs, right? Day-to-day jobs. They can't be flying out 10 14 days before the event and chilling in Joburg unless they're obviously working remotely. So a lot of them flew in Thursday morning and started throwing down Thursday night, a few obviously Wednesday nights already. So those are realities where you had the international athletes be there for weeks in advance and having training camps already, a week or two in advance. And then, which is nice, the CrossFit community aspect. I mean, that's one of the biggest things for me why I like CrossFit is bonding through trauma, right? And a nice little touch for me was, I think it's CrossFit Josie and all the other boxes. I don't know which ones, specifically in Joburg, but kind of opened their doors to the traveling athletes and said, come and test the workouts here. We have equipment, we have a worm, we have this, we have that. Get used to, the high felt lung burn. So it was really, really, really interesting and things that I didn't really expect to see. My expectations, I don't really know what my expectations were. I just knew it was going to start slow and end insane, just as these kind of multi-day events, the fatigue stacks up. And even though most conditioned athletes, the guys that were ending up, going through almost qualifying versus the guys that came second last and last, everyone started feeling it towards the end. And I think that's kind of, again, the beauty of the sport of CrossFit and these events, where the guy that came placed first and the guy that placed 40th, I don't want to say had the same stimulus, but they were equally tired but proud. And they had pushed themselves to their ceilings and how far they could go.
It's one of the reasons that I've fallen in love with CrossFit many years ago. And you pretty much just hit the nail on the head in the sense of, when you speak about the boxes opening up for people to come and stay this side, not necessarily you have to go to different accommodation for some of the top athletes to come and train this side a bit in warming up a couple of weeks before, depending, and just, kind of forming such a really friendly environment for athletes that are traveling from all different walks of, life and all around the world. it's that sense of community that kind of carries over. And I don't want to get all like la 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 about this whole thing. I mean, people going down there to go and work out and have a good time, but it's really cool where that sense of community comes through with fitness. And I mean, it's one of the reasons that I just love sports in general. You see it come through so well at events like that. And it honestly just kind of, again, don't want to get too fluffy here, but it really does warm the heart. It's the coolest thing to see because it expands well beyond just that. You know, when you talk about the people who make this all happen, I really want to emphasize just how many people are responsible for making an event like this so successful. And, you know, the athletes are the stars, make no mistake, but there's no question about behind every successful event is an army of people working tirelessly, essentially behind the scenes to make it all work. The organizers, the volunteers, the judges, the media crew, the recovery and medical team that we form part of, the equipment staff, the coaches, the families who come out to support and kind of just create the environment, the sponsors that work so hard to essentially give in the finances that make everything kind of possible. Most of these people will never receive necessarily public recognition, but without them, none of this happens. From the basic, you know, more physical task, if I can necessarily say, of the guys who are moving all the equipment and making sure that everything looks absolutely pristine and top notch and world class, all the way up to the guys who are handling the media, which looks like absolute chaos, but it's organized chaos and they pulled it off tremendously well. Without any of them, none of this happens. And honestly, being around people who care that deeply about creating something so special, for me, was actually almost one of the highlights of the weekend. I mean, there were plenty of highlights from the weekend for me, but working with those individuals at that level that are working so hard to put on the show that they did and allow the athletes to then go and do what they do to essentially light up that floor and just absolutely tear it up was really cool and really heartwarming to just see. I mean, those are all volunteers. Those people are taking the time out of their day to come and essentially put it all together to make sure everything comes together on the day and put it all together, not only for the spectators, but for the athletes to really enjoy it. And again, that kind of almost poured into one of the favorite things for the weekend for me, which it collectively created one hell of an atmosphere. You know, we worked really long hours. It was, like Tristan said, like we had mixed 4 hours of sleep throughout, you know, those days. I was about probably 3 hours because I needed to make sure that I could put Tristan to bed and then wake him up. And then eventually, you know, when we get to the morning, we get there early mornings and then leave late evenings. Walking to the venue each morning was something actually really, really cool. It was very special. I don't know if you felt the same, but like there was a unique energy that was kind of running through the, you know, through that area. Athletes arriving early, coaches reviewing strategies with them. You could see like game faces were coming in. Volunteers were like preparing the equipment. Judges were getting ready. And then you'd hear that music start playing, start dropping some in, and you knew shit was getting real. And slowly spectators would start filling the stands. And you could feel that anticipation. You could feel that energy just starting to spike up. And again, what made it even more special was I think it was cool to be so closely connected to the athletes and start to develop essentially relationships and get a bit of a backstory with the teams, because then the story becomes so much more tangible, especially for someone like me and Trust, because we're so closely connected. So for some athletes, this weekend represented like years of hard work, years of early mornings, sacrifice, you know, missed social events, training when nobody's necessarily watching, really kind of honing in on that craft. And everything just kind of came condensed into a few workouts over a single weekend, which is wild when you think about it. So you sometimes try and imagine why these emotions are running high, and that's exactly it. And being in that environment, I think, is incredibly special. You know, when you understand that, you begin to appreciate just how much pressure some of these athletes are carrying. And again, the atmosphere that they put together this year was so conducive to building up that massive anticipation that I feel just overall created such an incredible environment to be working in.
Yeah, I mean, on that buzz that you're talking about, you kind of walk in, and it's kind of you drive. Actually, you start with the drive. You drive towards Sandton Convention Center. We were usually there about an hour and a half, I think, before like the athletes would kind of warm up even. And drive in. There's like it's still dark. There's nothing going on. You know, it's kind of like I want to say empty streets. And then you go into the basement parking lot. There's a few more cars, and it kind of slowly builds. You kind of see a little bit more activity. Then you kind of walk up into the venue, see security, you see all the vendors setting up. As you said, last minute test this, ask the coach that, and it just kind of starts building and building. And then you get into like the recovery zone, and then you see, okay, there's more athletes here, and then the music starts, and it just builds out through the morning. So by the time we've had our first Americanos, that place is absolutely pumping. and we need to kind of match that energy. And I loved how we were there early. What was it, 2-3 mornings, really early, to try and sneak a little in-person episode. And I flew the camera equipment, the mics, everything up. I was so nervous someone was going to rob me. I was like, on the airport, I was like, clutching onto it. But it's okay. We're going to get it in person one. It's going to be super cool. And then it's just as soon as we get spotted, we're trying to hide behind the little, we had like this little wall. I don't know what that was. Oh, it was a changing room wall. Kind of hiding behind that, trying to set up the camera and record. And what was it? The one morning we just set up, test mic. What great, mic's already. Andy sits down, cue the music just starts. And we're like, okay, we can't talk over this loud music. Okay, that's fine. We'll do this afterwards. Then the evening we've got all the interns, and we're ready to rock and roll. I kind of borderline chase the interns out because I'm like, we need to record. Start it. It's quiet. Cue the music. The after party starts. What was that, Thursday night? Or like not the after party, but the whatever event, that social event. Okay, no, that's fine. We'll do that the next morning. Rock up the next morning. We start recording, actually. Busy recording. I'll try and find the clip. I'll give it a little clip. And you just had athletes kind of walking up to us while we were recording the podcast, asking us questions. And then we ended up just going, okay, let's just cut our losses. We're not going to record this in person. We end up working, an hour and a half, hour before they even start warming up. And that's our job. That's why we were there. And that, it was fun. Try to sneak a quick one there. We were like, no, we'll get 15 to 30 minutes uninterrupted, guaranteed at some point over this week. And how wrong we were. But it was still good. It was fun. It was part of the experience.
Can I just say that I have met parents that are less pedantically concerned about their children or their baby than Tristan was this entire weekend about his little parcel and his camera. This man had that thing hugged and protected it with his life the entire weekend.
You can see me on the live stream holding the camera. Actually, I was reviewing some of the stuff, like looking at the events, and I knew where I was standing for each event, and I could see myself standing there with like little bag, or like with the whole like bag with the camera and everything, just clutching it, So it was very much a real thing. It was very much in my head the whole time. Every 5 minutes you kind of work a little bit. You go like, where's that cap? Where's that tripod? But it all survived. It's still working, so it all worked out.
I felt so bad, bro, that you put so much effort in looking after that thing the entire weekend just so we could record, and then we landed up not getting the recording. I mean, like you said, it ended up just being good fun to obviously try, but I felt so bad more than anything else that it didn't come out for your sheer efforts of having to look after the equipment the entire weekend.
Well, it wasn't all a loss. The audio, of course, we can't really use, but there's some cool, we look kind of professional-ish with the backgrounds and stuff. I'm sure we'll use it somewhere. And we know the camera looks phenomenal. So we know for the future when we're in the same city, that's definitely an option. And I think hopefully the equipment and the hardware and the software and all of that will come together. But it looked good. It looked promising. So it's not a total loss. Little bit of a trial run, but it, did what it needed to do.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So one thing I wanted to touch on to get back to the event, and obviously the main reason that we were there, is I had a couple of questions that people asked in terms of, with the role that we necessarily played, other than the obvious that we've already necessarily stated. It's like, what actually goes on the recovery side? They're like, are you guys actually treating people? Are you guys not treating people? Are you guys like just giving a couple of rub downs? Like, what's actually the dealio? And I suppose, again, because we are behind the scenes, people don't necessarily see it. So people aren't exactly sure. They necessarily think, oh, you just go for like a bit of a light massage, or, people kind of take a Theragun and hit you and send you on your way. And one of the most important aspects of working in the recovery area is understanding exactly what the athlete needs when they walk through those particular doors. And not every athlete is dealing with an injury. Sometimes they're simply just looking to recover as effectively as possible between events, improve range of motion, reduce stiffness, flush fatigue muscles, or prepare their body for basically the demands of the next particular workout. Every workout's different. So it's going to be different to prepare for. And we have the role of trying to prepare them as best as we can. Other times, there may be genuine injury concerns that requires a more thorough assessment. In those situations, it's crucial for us, obviously, to establish whether the issue is new, pre-existing. Some athletes, which maybe Tris can touch on, that we worked with, unfortunately, had pre-existing issues coming into the competition, which always makes things interesting. And then once we've established the severity of the problem, we assess whether it's safe for the athlete to basically continue competing, which is always a tricky one, especially with some of the bigger injuries. And then from there, the goal simply becomes managing the situation as effectively as we can, maintaining clear communication with the athlete, which can get very, very tricky, especially when emotions and stuff are involved, and helping them understand the reality of their situation. And then obviously implementing as many strategies as we can to allow them to perform at the highest level possible, and obviously minimizing any sort of unnecessary risk. Elite competition is about navigating those challenges that inherently are just going to happen as much as it is about physical performance. And our role is to support those athletes in making informed decisions throughout the process. We need to remember that these athletes work their asses off to be there. And performing that hard, pushing that hard, sometimes the wheels are going to come off and they are going to injure themselves. And where, let's say, our average Joe, we would turn around and be like, listen, guys, let's back off, let's take a few days off, etc. We'll fix this, but it's not worth pushing through. Here, it's a bit of a game changer. Sometimes we're not necessarily actually trying to fix the injury, we're trying to manage it. And there's a difference. There's a difference between trying to get someone through the weekend in one piece and make sure it doesn't get worse, but still allow them to compete, to pull it off. I think people would be blown away, especially not knowing the injuries that some of these athletes have, on how serious some of these athletes' injuries are, and they still go out there and put on one hell of a show, and you would be none the wiser. And it just comes down to correctly managing it, and quite frankly, the grit that some of these athletes put on to just go and absolutely send it, having full confidence in us and in themselves to then make sure, cool, we'll patch up, we'll fix it, and we'll be able to push it through. And I think that almost kind of alludes to what we might have mentioned a little bit earlier when we spoke about like the emotional side of the competition. Again, one of the biggest takeaways from the weekend for me was witnessing that emotional side of the elite sport. We celebrate the victories as we should, but every victory usually comes with like dozens of stories that nobody necessarily sees. Again, you just see them across the finish line, and sometimes athletes will narrowly miss out. Athletes who had to overcome adversity simply just like, small things that necessarily present throughout the weekend that many people don't even know about. And one thing that really struck me very hard this whole event was athletes who came into the event carrying these injuries. And we had a few stories of athletes doing that, as mentioned before. And it was both challenging, but incredibly rewarding to see them put it off throughout the whole weekend at the end of the day. Having to manage them throughout the weekend during certain workouts, patch them up after, do it all over again. Sport has a way of kind of exposing character. And when things are going really well, anyone can look hella confident. But something that really stuck out for me, especially with some of the cases we worked with, which tremendous characters, it's when things don't go according to plan that you learn, in my opinion, who people really are. And I saw a lot of resilience over this weekend. It was really cool to see.
Yeah, the resilience on display was something special and as you said, pretty unique to sports. And another thing to consider is also the team dynamics. There's 40 teams and there's 4 people in a team. So you're injured and you're not feeling great. Your confidence isn't necessarily where it needs to be. Worried, certain workouts, coming into the competition fresh and healthy, you maybe in the back of your head, you go like, oh, okay, I need to hang in there for this one, or I've got a little bit of a weakness on gymnastics or whatever it might be. But now you're nursing a little bit of a, not really a full-blown injury necessarily, but it's in your head. And as you said, this is where kind of the true champions rise. And that was quite interesting to see that kind of the different levels and also the stages that even the guys that are at the top 10 or the top 5 kind of go through that typical, I would say panic, but for a second, kind of there's a bit of doubt. And I think the guys that are most successful are the guys that are able to kind of catch that panic and kind of rally and turn it around and go like, well, we have to have a go. And at the end of the day, you got to swing, because every swing you don't take, you're going to miss, guaranteed. So that was very cool. And we had some strange injuries. We had what was it, a teres minor, grade 2, I think he said. This guy, I thought, okay, patients always say the darnest things, like what, you're going to make to a 4-day event on day 1, you rock up there and you're like, yeah, no, it's a grade 2 tear. Okay. Pops his shirt off and you can still see the bruising on his shoulder at the back. And I'm like, oh, he wasn't kidding. It just happened like recently. And, this guy was incredible. Like his mindset was just something different. Like a guy as well, good personality, nice character, had a good team. And I mean, if you think about one of the gymnastic workouts or the events was like a sink, ring muscle up, bar muscle up. So it's not just can you perform an X amount of reps, high degree of skill, highly fatiguing movements, shoulder movements, with one of your rotator cuffs being a little bit not with us exactly where it needs to be, and then you still manage to pull that through. Even the snatch workouts, remembered we were trying to strap him differently for almost every workout to try and give him the best possible outcome and support. And the guy just rallied every time. Kind of after the event, he comes in, he's a bit concerned. It was sore, it wasn't sore, or he didn't feel good, and he would just kind of get some calories, get some rest, get a little pep talk from Uncle Andy, and off he goes. So that was really cool. We had some funky wrist injuries, we had some funky elbow injuries as well. You won't go into too much detail, but it's also now towards the end of the weekend, you kind of make a call there and go like, listen, are you in a position to qualify? Is this worth risking right now? Is there a chance that you can qualify online? So these were the kind of conversations we had, and that was very interesting as well, where you kind of had to go and say, look, is the mathing here? Is it worth going out for the last 2 events or 3 events or even the last day, if you know that even if you had to win every single event, you still, there's still very much an outside chance of you getting, but not a realistic chance. Those are interesting things, because I think one or two of the athletes that were ended at Renegade ended up qualifying through the online qualifier. So there's always a chance that, okay, lose the battle to win the war. And that's obviously a difficult conversation to have for the athlete, for us as well. The coaches are there, the team managers are there, the whole team is there. They're all standing there. It's a high pressure situation. And as you said, the emotions are running high. They've worked, some of them 12 months, some of them years, working to this point. And then you have to go like, oof, is it 50-50? Am I gonna go for it? Am I not gonna go for it? Which is, again, it's part of sports. Sometimes, things aren't going to go your way. And I think one of the big takeaways is the character building that sports in general, just it's going to build you up and it's going to break you down. And it's your choice at the end of the day, if you're going to stand up and be counted, or if you're just going to kind of sit and wallow in self-pity. And there were a lot of winners at the Rebel Renegade Games that week. Very, very few losers, I'd say. Incredible attitudes and mental fortitude on show and on display.
Yeah. Something that just I thought about, which I also picked up, which, I mean, we're really new into the event, but it was really apparent there. When you were talking about essentially, when injuries get to a certain point, or when the body starts to kind of get to a certain level of fatigue, and you start to kind of do those calculations in terms of, listen, weighing up the calculated risks, so to speak, about, listen, is this worth it, doing this particular workout, or what it could potentially make you risk, or potentially risk in terms of the rest of your season. And it's different dealing with individual athletes as opposed to team athletes. As an individual, you have that call because it's only you. The weight is purely on your shoulders, and you can turn around and be like, listen, I feel it's not best for my season. You have a chat with myself and Tris, and you're like, cool, it's the right decision to make. It's a very different ballgame when you're dealing with one person from a team. So you're 1 out of 4, and the other 3 might be absolutely top notch, and you're the one who's dragging them down. And sometimes I think it's difficult as a practitioner, where you need to not only just manage the single athlete, you need to then manage the coach, and you need to then manage the other team members, because you can't necessarily now take this poor athlete and put them in a really complicated situation that could not necessarily be very detrimental to them. But at the same time, you know full well that that athlete is going to do everything they can to sometimes even mask how bad they might be feeling because they don't want to let their team down. And it's very interesting seeing those team dynamics play versus obviously the individual and how that can play into the injury side of things. And obviously athletes pushing sometimes, I think, and even maybe sometimes talking about a ship just interested in I because they know that listen, and I mean Tristan and I try our best to always make sure we have a good rapport with all the athletes and communications top notch. And they know by now that we're never going to pull them for absolutely no reason. But it is interesting how much that team dynamic can play, especially making certain decisions.
And the non-verbals are a big one for me. Non-verbals, you can kind of see whether we saw the event on the TV or we were on the competition floor for whatever reason. You kind of you know how well or how not so well it went based on the way that the athlete kind of walks back into the recovery zone, and then also when the whole team's coming in and it's like it's a little bit tense, everyone's kind of looking a little bit worried. Is this injury? Is it an injury, or is it like strap us up and slap on the bum and off we go? So that was very nice. The non-verbals, you're kind of looking at the athlete, seeing, listening what they're saying, but also kind of looking at the body language that they're showing, the rest of the team showing, the team manager or the coach is showing. And, you kind of, the athlete's kind of talking to you and the coach is standing behind the athlete and like giving you like signs like no, don't answer that or like don't say this. So that, obviously they know their athlete. So me telling them, hey, listen, I think that's, you've got a small tear there. We obviously, it's not our first rodeo. We know how to work with a patient, but the coach or the team manager, we didn't know all of them. Some of them we met for the first time. So they were kind of getting a little bit worried, like, the eyes just kind of go wide, like, don't say it. And I said, no, you'll be fine. They'll just, can you do this and this? Yeah, okay, cool. Then you'll be able to do this event. And you kind of have to pick the patient up a little bit. And then suddenly you see the non-verbals, like you see the shoulders are kind of, the weight kind of lifts and the team suddenly high-fiving each other. And, you're like, okay, cool. I think we're in it. We're still in it. And, it's part of sport. I think athletes in their career can probably count on one hand the amount of events or matches that they showed up and they knew they were 110% healthy. There was nothing, absolutely nothing physically, mentally, emotionally, socially bothering them. And I think a lot of people kind of watch on TV and they go like, oh, why did this person not, it's just one more rep or it was just 5 kgs heavier. But there's so many intangibles and other things that go on behind the scene. And we were privileged enough to kind of get a sneak peek into that. I don't know about you. I was sneaking around on the warm-up floor a few times and checking on a few athletes and helping them warm up a bit. That was a lot of fun. Leaving Andy to deal with all the chaos of the recovery zone and just kind of getting a little, what was it, Biogen? I don't know what those drinks were. It was very nice.
Saved our asses a couple times.
Yeah, I was surprisingly, like when you, like, I mean, this is not a sponsored ad or anything, but when you kind of look at something and you go like, that can't be any good, or it's like, oh, it's just electrolytes or whatever. I can't remember what it was, but that was very tasty, and that definitely, that and the coffee stand, shout out to you guys, the coffee guys.
Just about to say, I can't remember who the coffee company was, otherwise we'd give you a shout out, but boys, you pulled us. That was proper. That caffeine kept us going.
Yeah, I know we probably be, were your number one supporters there, because it felt like it was like work, a little bit of like a debrief, what's happening with this athlete, what's happening with that athlete, 5 seconds of silence, and then like our eyes lock and go like coffee, and we just go get the coffee, which were at the end of their operational costs.
Yeah, and I mean, on that note, speaking in general to operational costs and just the whole event, I just want to actually express my gratitude, to the Rebel Renegade Games organizers as a whole, specifically to you, Tomo, for putting together just an exceptional event and allowing us to be a part of it. Thank you, dude. We really and truly appreciate it. It was something we're gonna never forget. To every athlete who stepped onto the competition floor, to every volunteer who gave up their time, to every judge, coach, the rest of the medical team. who I feel like we need to give a little shout out. Curry interns that helped us out. You boys and girls really stepped up to the plate, and Tristan and I really enjoyed having you guys on. So a massive thank you to everyone who just kind of put it together to put that event and make it what it was. Including the team that we worked with directly. It was something Tristan and I are never going to forget.
Yeah, it was super special. Ty as well, emceeing his little heart out. And then
yes, yeah, that there's something about that head,
Mr.
just
Personality
the way
himself.
He flocks it. I just
yeah. No, it was good. It was good. For me, it was nice to see the behind the scenes. As you said, it takes a village. We'd work, and then everyone's tired. Everyone's had a long day. Sit down and talk it through. This is what happened today. What's happening tomorrow, and just seeing the leaders behind the scenes that don't really get the recognition. They're not the as you said, the athletes are very much the stars of the show, but the unsung heroes in the background, guys on the walkie-talkies and the mics and the whatever and the screens, and having to have everything run smoothly. And how many times we don't even know things went right or went wrong. You wouldn't even be able to know, because they're just world-class team, and that's why they put on a world-class event. So yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity and for trusting us two delinquents to work with you.
Yeah, trust us, we're professionals, we promise. Fuck. All right, thanks for tuning in to Justin again. Once again, until next time, keep moving, keep doing the things. We'll catch you guys in episode 23.
Peace.